owners of this country are the voters of this country.
You're wrong about that, my friend.
Aren't the owners of this country the voters in this country who elected George Bush?
No, they're not. Listen, politics, these elections are a charade. It is a charade.
Oh, okay.
They are meant to, well, I'll tell you, just listen for a minute. Learn a little something. The elections and politicians are in place in order to give Americans the illusion that they have freedom of choice. You don't really have choice in this country.
Does the government work for us or do we work for the government? What if Democrats and Republicans were two wings of the same bird of prey? Tonight, what if elections don't matter? What if elections were actually useful tools for social control? What if they just provided the populace with meaningless participation in a process that validates an establishment that never meaningfully changes? What if that establishment doesn't want and doesn't have the consent of the governed? What if the two-party system was actually a mechanism used to limit so-called public opinion? What if there were more than two sides to every issue, but the two parties wanted to box you into a corner, one of their corners? What if there's no such thing as public opinion, because every thinking person has opinions that are uniquely his own? What if what we call public opinion was just a manufactured narrative that makes it easier to convince people that if their views are different, then there's something wrong with that, or there's something wrong with them? What if the whole purpose of the Democratic and Republican parties was not to expand voters' choices, but to limit them? What if the widely perceived differences between the two parties was just an illusion? What if the heart of the government policy remains the same no matter who's in the White House? What if the heart of government policy remains the same no matter what the people want? What if those vaunted differences between Democrat and Republican were actually just minor disagreements? What if both parties just want power and are willing to have young people fight meaningless wars in order to enhance that power? What if both parties continue to fight the war on drugs just to give bureaucrats and cops bigger budgets and more jobs? What if government policies didn't change when government leaders did? What if no matter who won an election, government stayed the same? What if government was really a revolving door for political hacks bent on exploiting the people once they're in charge? What if both parties supported welfare, war, debt, bailouts, and big government? What if the rhetoric that candidates displayed on the campaign trail was dumped after electoral victory? What if Barack Obama campaigned as an anti-war, pro-civil liberties candidate and then waged senseless wars while assaulting your rights that the Constitution is supposed to protect? What if George W. Bush campaigned on a platform of non-intervention and small government and then waged a foreign policy of muscular military intervention and a domestic policy of vast government borrowing and growth? What if Bill Clinton declared that the era of big government was over, but actually just convinced Republicans like Newt Gingrich that they can get what they want out of big government too? What if the Republicans went along with it? What if Ronald Reagan spent 6 years running for president, promising to shrink the government, but then the government grew while he was in the White House? What if, notwithstanding Reagan's ideas and cheerfulness and libertarian rhetoric, there really was no Reagan revolution at all? What if all this is happening again? What if Rick Santorum is being embraced by voters who want small government, even though Senator Santorum voted for the Patriot Act, for an expansion of Medicare, and for raising the debt ceiling by trillions of dollars? What if Mitt Romney is being embraced by voters who want anyone but Barack Obama, but they don't realize that Mitt Romney might as well be Barack Obama on everything from warfare to welfare? What if Ron Paul is being ignored by the media, not because, as it claims, he's unappealing or unelectable, but because he doesn't fit into the pre-manufactured public opinion mold used by the establishment to pigeonhole the electorate and create the so-called narrative that drives media coverage of elections? What if the biggest difference between most candidates was not substance, but style? What if those stylistic differences were packaged as substantive ones to reinforce the illusion of a difference between Democrats and Republicans? What if Mitt Romney wins and ends up continuing most of the same policies that Barack Obama promoted? What if Barack Obama's policies, too, are merely extensions of those from George W. Bush? What if a government that manipulated us could be fired? What if a government that lacked the true and knowing consent of the governed could be dismissed? What if it were possible to have a real game changer? What if we need a Ron Paul to preserve and protect our freedoms from the government? What if we could make elections matter again? What if we could do something about this?
Don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge. These people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They're in the same country clubs. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies. There are now 3. It will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties. There are a handful of insurance companies. There are about 6 or 7 information thing. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice. Right. You don't get the real important choice. There's no freedom of choice.
That's a great point.
It's been a long time coming. But tonight, change has come to America.
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the bank.
That's why I have a plan that will bring our combat troops home by March of 2008.
That's why I put forward a bill that would begin a phased redeployment and have all our troops out by March 31st of next year. Close down Guantanamo, restore habeas corpus. I intend to close Guantanamo, and I will follow through on that. No more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient.
Well, I think at this point he's perfected the art of forgetting Barack Obama, the candidate.
The Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, said again yesterday that the U.S. would be willing to extend the U.S. military presence in the country. It's a plan Obama has already approved.
Several tens of thousands of U.S. troops indefinitely staying in Iraq, not withdrawal in Iraq, potentially doubling forces in Afghanistan.
Well, it is now November of 2011. Guantanamo Bay continues to be open for business.
President Obama today proposed something new. Something called prolonged detention, indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today.
U.S. President Barack Obama has signed the defense bill.
So the last thing the president did in 2011 was sign a bill that pretty much does away with due process.
That would authorize him to use the military to arrest people in the United States, to keep them from a lawyer, to keep them from a judge, to keep them from a jury, to lock them up for as long as he wants.
And he's even authorized the killing of a U.S. citizen.
Tim Geithner has been picked as the next Treasury Secretary. Geithner's expected nomination was greeted with praise across Wall Street.
Timothy Geithner appointed Mark Patterson, former top lobbyist for Goldman Sachs, as his chief of staff.
Goldman Sachs was the largest domestic recipient of funds in this AIG counterparty arrangement. Joshua Bolton was actually the London office manager for Goldman Sachs. The chief of staff for Timothy Geithner today is someone from Goldman Sachs. Mr. Cash Carey, who's handling the TARP, he was from Goldman Sachs. I mean, is there anybody that isn't from Goldman Sachs?
Especially when you add to it that when it was all said and done, Goldman's chief competitor in the bond market, Lehman Brothers, had been vanquished, and Goldman now had a monopoly on all fixed income trading basically in the world, and was now the most profitable investment bank in the history of the world, and is now not subject to any further regulation than they were prior to the crisis. So it's good to be Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs, who today announced that they have never been more profitable. Goldman Sachs netting $13.4 billion in 09, topping the firm's 07 record.
William Lynn, he was appointed to the #2 position at the Defense Department. William Lynn, also a former top lobbyist for Raytheon, one of the 5 largest defense contractors.
Raytheon announced today that it has signed a $145 million contract.
Raytheon has won a $68.6 million contract.
Raytheon announced today it has been awarded a $107 million U.S. Air Force contract. Raytheon announced Monday that its subsidiary, Raytheon Technical Services, has won a U.S. Army Forces Command contract.
Raytheon Company announced today it has received a $1.7 billion contract.
You can take that to the bank.
The policies that will get us working again as a nation are policies, I understand, having worked in the private sector.
In the first 4 years, this will grow the economy at approximately 4% per year for each of those 4 years. It will add 11.5 million new jobs for Americans.
Number 1 on my list, Obamacare. I'll get rid of that on day 1. I will cut, cap, and balance the federal budget. We're going to immediately cut all federal spending by 5%. I will insist on the military so powerful no one would ever think of challenging it.
Never seen a guy change his positions on so many things so fast. on a dime.
I was asked about the Massachusetts plan. Was it something I'd impose on the nation? And the answer is absolutely not.
How do you ensure the 45 or 50 million Americans who are not on the books?
Well, that's what we did in Massachusetts, and that is we put together an exchange, and the president's copying that idea. I'm glad to hear that. This is really taking what the Democrats have talked about, a Democratic goal that we share, which is getting everybody insured. Everybody should have insurance. This is something that was crafted for Massachusetts. It would be wrong to adopt this as a nation. Those who follow the path that we pursue will find it's the best path. And we'll end up with a nation that's taken a mandate approach.
Number one on my list, Obamacare. I'll get rid of that on day one. I will preserve and protect a woman's right to choose, and am devoted and dedicated to honoring my word in that regard. I was always personally opposed to abortion. I am pro-life. No, TARP was the right thing to do. I think there is need for economic stimulus. I have never supported the President's Recovery Act, all right, the stimulus. No time, nowhere, no how have I supported the President's stimulus.
Pro-choice, pro-life, pro-gun control. Now he becomes a lifetime member of the NRA. He was pro-cap and trade. Now he's against cap and trade. He was pro-mandate for the whole country. And then he becomes anti-mandate and takes that page out of his book and republishes the book. And I can go on and on.
The number one contributor to Barack Obama's super PAC is Goldman Sachs. The number one contributor to Mitt Romney's super PAC is Goldman Sachs.
Mitt Romney stealing all of Barack Obama's big dollar Wall Street donors.
A good chunk of his funds came from his buddies on Wall Street, like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Bank of America.
Raytheon announced today that it has agreed to sell its commercial laundry equipment business to private investment firm Bain Capital. Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney announced today that Raytheon has been awarded a $2.2 million contract.
Money plays a much more important role in what is done in Washington than we believe. To get that kind of money, you've got to cozy up as an incumbent to all of the special interest groups who can go out and raise money for you from their members. And that kind of relationship has an influence on the way you're going to vote,
You can take that to the bank.
President Obama will turn this country around. Excuse me, President Romney. President Obama. President Romney.